My technician didn't set me up today. Can you tell by the camera? So let's just hope this works. So last week we're going to be in 2 Kings again, or 1 Kings, so you can turn there. 1 Kings 14. And we're going to continue the lesson that we started last week. And actually, 1 Kings 17. So our lesson started last week with, I'd been out at camp a couple weeks ago for the youth retreat and heard James talk. James went out there and talked to the kids, and it was powerful. It was very, very connecting. And the 2 points that I said last week and I want to bring up again this week is that the first point about James being out there is work that's being done that we don't know about. And those connections are so, so powerful. And I want us to continue those connections, continue connecting with each other in all sorts of ways. None of us can connect with everybody, but we can all connect with certain people. And those are powerful. As we grow, and we grow individually closer to God, and we grow closer to God as a church family, Satan is right there. He's wanting to divide us, and we need these strong relationships, and we need to build them, and we need to pray for each other. Pray for the work that's going on, even if you don't know what it is, because there's a lot going on out there, a lot of connections that we don't know about. Pray for that. And the second thing that was very powerful about what James did at camp is what he did is he took these lessons that all these kids know, that we know them, at least the general idea of them, these stories, and connected them with our real life, with our feelings, or he did it with the kids, what they're feeling, what their life is like. Because sometimes there's that big disconnect of what we read in Scripture and then what our life is like. And he really took the feelings of what Elijah was going through and applied it to what they're going through. And there's a power there. And I encourage us when we're reading and studying God's Word to do that, to not just see it as a historical account of something, but how did God act towards his people? And how did his people act? And how did they react to God? And that's what the power was in those lessons. And that's what we're going to continue on with today. So just to kind of briefly recap where we're at is Elijah was a prophet of God, and he was living during the time when the kingdoms were divided. And you remember the kingdoms were divided because of Solomon's sin. Solomon had chased after his wife and their gods, and God said, because of this, we will not have one kingdom anymore. It's going to be divided. And so Elijah was prophesying in a time, he was a prophet when Israel was under the leadership of a very evil king, and that was King Ahab. And if you turn to chapter 21, actually start in chapter 16, verse 31, it says, as if it had, this is talking about King Ahab. And King Ahab is the king of Israel. This is the northern nation. As if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, he took for his wife Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of Sidonians, and went and served and worshipped Baal. And then if you read in chapter 21-25, it says, there was none who sold himself to do what was evil in the sight of the Lord like Ahab, whom Jezebel his wife incited. So this is a very evil king, and his wife Jezebel is even more evil. He's evil a lot because of who she is. And this is the scene that our story is in. And at the beginning of chapter 17, Elijah predicts a drought. And during this time of this drought that ends up lasting for 3.5 years, we see that God provided for him. And that's an important part of the story, because during all this time, God has shown Elijah on a daily basis, I'm going to take care of you. I can provide for you. Even when there's nothing in the land, I'm going to take care of you. And every single day, Elijah saw that. That's important because Elijah knows what God is doing, and he knows that God is powerful. During this time, we also know that Ahab and Jezebel want to kill Elijah. And remember how we talked about Obadiah? He's not really a major character in this story, but why we bring him up is it shows that everybody knew that Ahab and Jezebel were out to kill Elijah. And not only did everybody in the land know that, they didn't just know it, they were fearful for their lives. Because they said, remember when he said, Elijah came to Obadiah and said, "Go tell Ahab I'm here." He's like, "No way. I'm not going to go tell him, because I'm going to come back and you're going to be gone and I'm going to be dead." They feared for their life because of what Ahab and Jezebel were doing. And it wasn't just in the kingdom of Israel. If you read at chapter 18, about starting in 10, it says all the nations surrounding them knew that they were seeking him. And they went to the nations and said, "Are you hiding? Have you seen Elijah?" And they had to say yes or no. And so the nations around were fearful of Ahab and Jezebel. That's an important part of the story. Just tuck it back in your mind. And yet, through all of this, through being hunted down, through living in a drought, God provided for Elijah and he protected him. And this is sort of, James, the theme for the youth retreat was going up a mountain and then coming down the other side. Well, this was Elijah going up the mountain. He's walking up the mountain and he sees God providing for him. He's strong. He can see what's happening. And then at the very end, when God says, "I want you to go see Ahab," he's confident. He walked up and he did what God said. He walked confidently up to Ahab. And this is in chapter 18 at the beginning. And this is the man, this is the king of the land who wants to kill him. And he walks confidently to him. And not only does he go to him, he says, when Ahab sees him, he says, "Oh, there you are, Elijah, you troubler of Israel." And Elijah turned it around. Here's the man who wants to kill him, and he rebuked him. He said, "No." He says, chapter 18, verse 18, he answered, "No, I've not troubled Israel. You have, and your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of the Lord and followed the Baals." So not only does he confidently approach him, he rebukes him, and then he commands him. And this is what you're going to do. You're going to meet me up on top of the mountain. And we're going to see who the real God is. And that was Mount Carmel. And we know what happens up there. So this is him going up. He sees God's protection and his provision. He knows who his God is. And then at the end, it's like he's racing up the mountain. And he's at the top. And we know what happens at the top, right? The battle of the gods. The battle of the Baals and Asherah. And the battle of Jehovah God. And when they built the altar for Jehovah God, they drenched it 3 times. It was soaked. And when God came down and consumed it, he didn't just consume the sacrifice. It says it consumed, let's just read it. It says he consumed the offering, the wood, the stones, and the dust. Have you guys ever tried to burn dust? It consumed the dust. I don't know how that happens, but it was a mighty way, and it licked up all the water that was around it. There was no doubt who the true God was. And all the people up there knew who the true God was. And they even said in chapter 18, verse 39, "And when all the people saw it, they fell on their faces and said, 'The Lord, he is God. The Lord, he is God.'" And then they seized the prophets of Baal and killed them. There was no doubt who God was, who the true God was. This is when the drought ends. And he tells Ahab, "You better get going down the mountain because the rain is coming." And it's very interesting. We don't know what went through Ahab's mind, but Ahab hadn't seen rain in 3.5 years. And yet it sounds like he didn't even question it. He just took off. The king who wants to kill him is still listening to Elijah. And then the drought ends. The rain does come. Elijah is up on top of the mountain. You can't see God's power in any more of a way. It wasn't just a one-time thing. He's seen God's power for 3.5 years on a daily basis. And then, I'll never forget the way James says this. He's just handed a little note. Somebody just gives him a little note. And what does that note say? At the beginning of chapter 19, Ahab goes back and tells his wife what happened up on Mount Carmel. And Jezebel sent a message to Elijah saying, "So may the gods do to me, and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by this time tomorrow." That note didn't say anything new. Everybody in the land knew that. Everybody in all the kingdoms surrounding knew that. They knew that Jezebel wanted to kill him. You can just imagine Elijah taking that note and saying, "Yeah, so what? We know you've wanted to kill me, and we know what your gods can do. We just saw it. We just saw what your gods can do." But that wasn't Elijah's reaction. Elijah just gets handed this note that didn't say anything new. And what did it cause him to do? He's up on top of this mountain, powerful, and it caused him to just crash, just tumble down the mountain, crashing on the way down, and end up in a heap at the bottom. It caused him, after hearing that, there was nothing different. It says he was afraid, and he ran. He went to Beersheba where his servant was, and then he says, I'm going by myself. I'm not even with you. And then he left him, and he went away into the wilderness, and he laid under a broom tree. And he says, I don't want to live. I don't want to live anymore. It says, "It is enough now, O Lord. Take away my life, for I am no better than my fathers." It's incredible what caused him to crash down like that and just lay in a heap, to where he knew who his God was. He knew the power of him. He knew that God was taking care of him, and yet here he is, he wants to die because of what evil Jezebel had told him. I don't know what caused that. I don't know what shifted in his mind, but I do believe it was in his mind because it wasn't in his circumstances. His circumstances told him that it doesn't matter what her gods do. You just saw what her gods can do. And she's been trying to take your life for 3.5 or more years. And you can see she's powerless to do that. There was nothing in his circumstances that caused that. It was something in his mind that caused him to see that. And he was focusing on Jezebel. He was focusing on what she said she was going to do, instead of focusing on what he just saw God do. It was his mind looking at the fearful things in his life versus on the power of God. And ladies, we all have Jezebels in our lives. We all have situations and things and people that can just cause us to crumble down, even though we have seen and we know without a doubt, absolutely without a doubt, who our God is. And we can see him take care of us day in and day out, and we see it in simple ways, and then we see it in mighty ways. And yet something shifts, and it causes us to crash. It causes us to focus, instead of seeing who God is and seeing his power, it causes us to see the problem. And I think of Elijah. One of the things I think of, maybe it was unmet expectations that caused him to crumble. You can't see a scene like that and not know who the God is. It was clear it was not the Baals and Asherah. They responded no way. No matter what the prophets did, they didn't respond. And yet Jehovah God, he responded, and in a mighty way. And everybody around him, all the people there said, yes, we know who God is. Even Ahab at that point listened to him. But the one person that didn't was Jezebel. It could have been that Elijah thought, oh, now Jezebel's going to change her heart. Now Jezebel will really see who God is. And she didn't. No, we don't know that. We don't know what it was that caused him to crumble like that. But I think of me, and I think of our lives, that there could be something like that when everybody around is recognizing something, but the one person we want to recognize that some change is there doesn't. They don't change, and it just can send us reeling. The Jezebels in our life could be situations. We want a situation to change, and it just doesn't change the way we want it to. There's things out there that that cause fear in our lives. For whatever reason they are, they're always right there. And when we focus on them, we see the fear. I want us to remember that there was a reason that Elijah could be fearful. Jezebel had power. She was the, whatever I guess you'd call her, the queen of the land, but she had a lot of power. So if he focused on her power as a worldly power, yes, he had fear. And sometimes that's what we do. There's a situation, a person, a thing in our life that really does hold power. It absolutely holds power, but it only holds power in the worldly sense. It never holds power against God and his strength. Elijah was focusing on that. When he heard the same news, it turned his mind to focus on the storm. He had just seen a magnificent, glorious sun, and yet his mind was focusing on the fog, not on who his Lord was. Sometimes I get talking and forget where my notes are at. Here's Elijah crashed down the mountain. I can just imagine him just emotionally, just coming down, and he's just laying under this tree saying, I don't want to live. I can't do this anymore. And how did God respond to Elijah? Come on, Elijah. Didn't you just see? Haven't you seen what I've done for you? Don't you remember the ravens? Every single day I gave them to you. Come on, Elijah. What do you think? You know her gods don't have any power. Come on, get up. Quit your whining. Let's go. Is that how he responded? No, none of that. He didn't respond that way at all. It says, I want to read because it's so powerful. He's laying down under the broom tree. A broom tree has really, really, really deep roots. So in times of drought, it will get the water from deep in the earth. And so that's where, out after 3.5 years, but he's laying under this tree, and behold, an angel touched him and said to him, I want you to, he looked, and behold, there was at his head a cake baked on hot stones and a jar of water. And he ate and drank and lay down again. No, God is a compassionate, loving, merciful, giving God. And Elijah was hurting for whatever reason it was. He was hurting. He was in pain. He was in emotional pain. He gave him nourishment, and he got food. He provided warm food. Our God is not a minimalist God. He didn't just give him the bare minimum to get by. He gave him what he needed. And I want us to turn to Lamentations. Now this morning, I was just like, where's Lamentations at? Sang the song about 6 times, and I couldn't find it. I finally had to go to the front to find it. And made me think, when you're trying to find something and you can't, don't give up. Just keep doing it. Even if your neighbors found it in 2 seconds, and it takes you to keep looking, because it's encouraging and it's helpful. And sometimes you just can't figure out where these are at. If I can at least know it's before or after Psalms, I'm at least halfway there. But sometimes you can't, and you got to go to the front. And I want you to know, in my younger years, I would have thought that was cheating, but not anymore. It's no longer cheating. So Lamentations 3:22. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. We've gone over that verse a lot. That God delights in taking care of us. He provided warm food for for Elijah. He gave him the nourishment he needed. And then he said, I need you to rest. You need some sleep. And so he gave him his food and water, warm food, and then he let him sleep. Elijah, he came back up, he woke up again and gave him some more food. He gave him what he needed at that time. He never accused. He never chastised him. He never said, why? How could you do this? He met him where he was at, in his pain, in his sorrow, for whatever reason that caused him to go there. And that is so powerful. We have such a giving God. Sometimes we want to pull away from God because we're not perfect, or we can't understand things. Don't do that. We have our times when we stumble and we fall, but know that God is right there with us. He was right there in the drought. He was right there in the mighty and the powerful, and he's right there in the crash too with his people. Right after this, he tells them, I want you to get up. I want you to come here. Elijah walks 40 days to Mount Horeb. And this is the scene where we see I'll just find it in the book. When he's on the mountain and there's a strong wind, this is chapter 19, verse 11. The Lord passed by, and there was a great strong wind toward the mountains and broke into pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord wasn't in the wind. And after the wind, an earthquake came. But the Lord wasn't in the earthquake. And then after the earthquake, a fire. He wasn't in the wind, the earthquake, or the fire. This is when God comes in a whisper. And then after this, he says, Elijah, what are you doing here? And Elijah answers him, and then God tells him, Elijah, I've got some work for you to do. This is where I want you to go, and this is what I want you to do. And this is all in a gentle, kind way. He never came with condemnation. He didn't come in with this huge force. He came as a whisper to him and said, we've got work to do. Let's move on. This is where I want you to go, and this is what I want you to do. And never in this whole story is there ever a mention of Jezebel. That is so powerful. The thing in his life that caused him to stumble, God didn't address at all. God never said, don't worry about Jezebel. I've got that taken care of. He never reassured him saying, I'll get this. And he never reassured him saying, I'm going to take the evil away. Because as a matter of fact, Jezebel stayed in control and she continued her evil. Remember how she killed Naboth? Because her husband Ahab wanted Naboth's land? So the evil was allowed to continue. God didn't say, you can move on with the work I have you because I'm taking care of this. Not one mention of that. But somewhere in there, somewhere in that exchange, Elijah knew that God was in control. His mind shifted back again, and he knew he didn't have to worry about the evil in his life. He knew he didn't have to worry about that problem, that he could focus on who his God was and the work that he had for him. And that is so powerful. If you think of you have something in your life that causes so much pain that you don't want to live, and God doesn't even address it. What he does say is, we've got work to do. Let's move on. Your job is to draw close to me. Your job is to become who I want you to be, and I'll take care of that. I'll take care of that problem in your life. And it was in his timing. I know for me, I would have wanted Jezebel and Ahab taken care of a lot quicker. I would have wanted them taken care of right then and there. But Elijah didn't. There's no mention of that. And I just can't, it's amazing to me. It was again a shift in his mind, a shift away from, I don't care what Jezebel does. She can do what she wants, but I'm going to go close to God, and I'm going to do what God asked me to do. God has a plan for me, and he's got a mission, and he is in control. God did take care of Jezebel in his own time. He took care of Ahab, and that's a fascinating story. Some of these stories in the Bible are pretty amazing, but if you guys want to read how Ahab dies, it's in chapter 22, kind of towards the end of the chapter. But Ahab had this big scheme of how he's going into battle and how he's going to protect himself, and it sort of backfires on him, and it's incredible. And I don't know where I was going with that, but one of the things that I want to bring up is that Elijah was never protected. He was never plucked out from his situations. He wasn't protected from the drought. He had to deal with it. He wasn't protected from the people around him that wanted to hurt him. He wasn't protected from his own emotions. He had emotions just like we do. But through that, through walking through that, he was given the strength he needed. He was supported. He was guided. And that, to me, is powerful, because so much I want to just be out of the situation. I want those situations gone. I want them fixed. I want to know that they're going to be fixed. And God didn't deal with Elijah that way, and I don't think he deals with us that way. He says, what I want you to do is look to me. I'm always there with you. I will always be there through everything that you have to go through. And I'll show you that I'm there. Our job is to keep our eyes on him. I want us to leave here to not let just these little notes that were given by the world, these things, the darkness of the world, and it doesn't even have to be evil. That's what I want us to remember. Jezebel was evil, but the things that we deal with, those little things that just are handed to us that just want us to throw our hands up and say, I can't do it. I'm done. It's not worth it. Don't let those worldly things devastate us. Don't let them turn your focus away from God. Always hold on to who God is. Hold on to his steadfast love, his mercy, his compassion. And it doesn't matter in your life if you're walking up the mountain and feeling strong, or if you're running up the mountain, you're really feeling strong, or you're up there, or you're kind of tumbling down. It doesn't matter where you're at. God is with you. And to know that we don't have a purpose just when we're up on the top. We have a purpose wherever we're at, even if we're at the bottom. And encourage us to always look for God. Always see that he's there to care for us, even when we are down at the bottom and hurting. I hope you guys have a great week, and throw away those notes. Bye-bye, guys.